Welcome to A State of Mind. This is Julian Royce. I'm recording this here from my office on Pearl Street in downtown Boulder, Colorado, where I work as a somatic trauma-informed psychotherapist, coach, and meditation teacher. And I'm just wrapping up the semester where I've been teaching mindfulness meditation in 2 classes at Naropa University as part of their eco-psychology master's program. It's been a really wonderful experience. It's been a real blessing to get to connect with the students there in that way and to share and teach some of what I know about mindfulness and meditation. My life has been incredibly full the last couple months, and this is something I seem to share in common with today's guest, whom I know as Bloom. His musical name is Bloomurian. I'll introduce him more in a moment, but as I say in my conversation with him, I really admire how many projects he's involved with, how much he's getting done in his day-to-day life. He's just all over the place doing a lot of stuff. Part of what has been making my life so full is I've been creating and hosting some beautiful gatherings at my home, which is a co-living house I started last summer. We're calling it the Awareness House, and it's developed into a really sweet community, and it's been really rewarding to create some amazing events there, bringing people together. It's a big part of the intention of creating the house in the beginning. So it feels like it's finally bearing fruit that was envisioned a year ago. A couple of weeks ago, we had a house concert here with Bloom and his partner Saoirse and the artist Chances Are Good. Definitely recommend him. Check it out. It was a really sweet house concert. I'm going to link to all these artists in the show notes below. And then the following night, I co-led a sound healing journey with my friend Matthew, who goes by the name Seer Music. His musical project is called Seer Music. And his live performance of his new album was just phenomenal. I really recommend it. Definitely check it out. Again, I will link to that below. Another thing I've been doing that's been taking up some of my time is DJing. I've been developing myself a bit as a DJ. I've been learning how to do that. And in fact, Bloom, who is the guest on this episode, taught me how to DJ last summer. He gave me some lessons, which I really appreciated. And so a few days ago here, I DJ'd for the grand opening of a new mushroom-themed cafe called Myco Cafe, started by Rumsey. And he's going to be a guest on this podcast in the near future. So definitely check out that episode when it drops. He is, the creator of Myco Cafe, a powerful community organizer and activist, and he's incredibly knowledgeable about the neuroscience of psychedelics. So I am looking forward to that podcast episode with him. And today, as I said, I'm speaking with Robin Liepman, aka Bloom, aka Bloomurian is his musical name. And he has a lot to share, so it's a great conversation. He's very passionate about permaculture, about helping to create the more beautiful world that our hearts know is possible, to borrow the memorable phrase from our friend Charles Eisenstein. And part of how Bloom has been up to that has been his music, but also in creating events and being parts of festivals and things that are bringing people together and creating a new kind of culture in that way. And I super appreciate that about him. It's part of why I wanted to have him on here. And it was just so sweet to get to talk to him. So without further ado, I bring you Mr. Bloom. So I'm here today with Robin Liepman. Robin, thanks for being on the podcast.
Yeah, thanks, Julian.
I mostly know you by the name Bloom.
Uh-huh.
And your music name is Bloomurian, right?
Yeah.
Cool. You want to share with us how your name came into being?
Yeah, it's funny. Someone just asked me the other day if I was like an evolved Pokemon that went through different stages of evolution. And I thought about it and I said, yeah, I was born as Robin, and then I evolved into Bloom, and then evolved into Bloomurian as my final Pokemon stage. Or maybe there's more stages of evolution, but
Nice.
It's been a journey, and the name Bloom actually came during a vision quest that I was on in college through a program called Sierra Institute, where we did 10 days backpacking into the Ansel Adams Wilderness, which is near Yosemite. And then 3 of those days, we went on to a solo vision quest where we went to find a spot to just be by ourselves. For most of us, it was our first time in our lives just being completely alone for that much time. And we were fasting. We did drink water just from the river. We had water filter pumps. And the day that we went to find our solo spot, it was kind of a half day to ourselves. And then we came back for our final time together before doing the full 3-day vision quest. And so during that day, we were asked or invited to tune in with nature and with the spot that we found and with the land and see if a nature name, or what they called it was a trail name, came to us to kind of get in touch with this new part of ourselves that we were getting in touch with, like a rites of passage and a transformation. And so when I came back to the group after the day of finding my solo spot, I said that there were three possible names that came to me. One was Flow, one was Mountain, and one was Bloom. And as soon as I said Bloom, the whole group lit up and they said, "That's your name, you're totally Bloom." And so during the 3-day vision quest, I got to sit with the energy of that in the name. And I was actually studying psychology and cognitive science at UC Santa Cruz. And
cool.
I was especially taking classes in humanistic and positive psychology that was really focusing on the blooming of human potential rather than only focusing on like past traumas and issues. I mean, that's all important. But then beyond that, what do we do when we have resolved things in our lives? We go towards our greatest potential. So the name Bloom really resonated with me for that. And then as I started going to festivals and going to Burning Man, where everyone has a playa name, and then traveling the world after I graduated college, the name Bloom just stuck, and that's what I introduced myself to people as. And then as I started playing music and performing, I was going by the name Bloom for my music, Bloom Music Project, but then there actually became a certain point a few years ago where I found out there was another artist named Bloom.
I was wondering about that.
Yeah, it's all, in all capitals. I think he's from Germany, and he has a lot of listens on his music, and it's different than the music I make, but it's in a similar enough audience that people were starting to get confused. So he released this one song called Earth Breath, and a lot of people thought it was me. So people would tag me in their Instagram videos dancing to the song because they thought it was me. And I'm like, that's not me, but it's a great song. And then my friend Eli that I met in Lake Atilan made a song with him too. So it got even more confusing. And so at that point, I started looking into an evolution of the name Bloom, which I was excited about anyways, because I felt like when you search Bloom on any search engine, there's just tons of song names, tons of artists that pop up called Bloom. So I wanted something a little more unique, but still wanted the word Bloom within it.
Nice.
So I made this huge, list. And then Bloomurian is Bloom and Lemurian combined. So I feel really connected to the Lemurians because for those who don't know, the Lemurians are an ancient civilization that mostly they say existed before the time of Atlantis. I think there was a little bit of overlap between Lemuria and Atlantis, but it was in the Pacific, whereas Atlantis was said to be on the Atlantic Ocean. Lemuria was on the Pacific Ocean, and it was said to be a civilization that was advanced and completely harmonious with the land, with each other, just kind of the ideal, thriving, beautiful civilization of everyone symbiotically working together with each other and with the land. And so I resonate with that. And also, they say Hawaii is the tip of what used to be Lemuria, because they say that Lemuria sunk underwater, that there was a giant flood, and what remained was Hawaii was kind of the tallest mountain peak that is still above the ocean. And so I spent a lot of time in my life in Hawaii, and then where I grew up in San Luis Obispo, some people even say used to be part of ancient Lemuria, because they say it spanned kind of from like where Japan, New Zealand, Australia is to Hawaii, all the way to the west coast of California.
Like the Pacific crust.
Yeah.
Interesting. That's cool. Actually, I once bought a large quartz crystal, and the guy said, "This is from Lemuria." And I haven't heard as much about it as what you just shared. That was cool.
Yeah, there's Lemurian quartz crystals as well. I think they're the ones with like the horizontal lines.
That's what I have.
So that's a Lemurian quartz, and some people even say there's an underground civilization underneath Mount Shasta called Telos, which is like ancient Lemurians that are still living there. So there's lots of myth and legend, and I just like how the name Bloomurian like brings in the energy of a blooming flower, but also this mystery of this ancient civilization.
And it invokes that.
Yeah,
that's interesting. Yeah, I mean, it's that myth of the flood is a universal thing. Yeah. Speaking of psychology, Sigmund Freud explained it away as having to pee when you're like sleeping, and then you start to dream about water. But I think that's a little too glib, right? I mean, there's something more profound. This, but this, in the sense of the lost age, totally. I think that idea is becoming more validated. Actually, it's certainly possible if you look at our evolutionary history. Because, like, according to what I understand, human beings are the same physiologically, basically more or less as we were at least 100,000 years ago. Some people put it as far as 1 million, and civilization as we know it is 6,000 years old. So it doesn't because it just makes sense. There could
Yeah.
have been different civilizations that we don't have any idea about.
Totally, and there is evidence of it. And there's this place in Turkey. I don't know how to pronounce it, but it's something like Gogola
Oh, yeah.
Tepe. That when the archaeologists found the evidence of this civilization that existed way before we have documentation of history of civilization existing, they actually tried to bury it up because they were like, "This is gonna completely change our whole concept of human history," and they didn't want to even like
They didn't want to
deal
go
with that.
there.
But then eventually it got rediscovered, and yeah, there's evidence that there's civilizations way earlier, advanced civilizations way earlier than what we have documented.
Yeah, interesting. Well, cool. Well, that's cool to hear about your name. There's a lot there.
Mm,
I feel like that communicates something about a lot about you
mm,
actually and your journey. And so that wilderness trip you did with the
mm,
solo, where you're on your own in the wilderness for 3 days fasting, was that
mm.
outward bound or a
It
different
was a
thing?
similar program. It was called Sierra Institute, and it was started in Humboldt, and then it branched out to UC Santa Cruz and probably some other schools. And it was started by this guy, Walker Abel, and then he trained a lot of people to do what he originally did. And so the cool thing about it was most of the programs were just wilderness backpacking focused, but some of them had a theme of eco psychology and wilderness therapy. Different ones had different themes. And there was also ones that had a combination of homesteading. So part of the time you would go backpack and then you would go back to his land, which I'm pretty sure is in
Huh.
Bonnie Doon,
Oh,
and do some homesteading.
oh,
Mm,
cool. That's really cool. Actually, I did an outward bound program kind
mm,
of like that when I
mm,
was, I think I was 18, and
mm,
we were supposed to do a 3-day solo journey,
mm,
similar to what you described. But ours on my program, it got cut short, so I think we just had maybe 2 days or a day and a half. But we didn't do the name thing,
mm,
so that's a beautiful rites of passage,
mhm.
and, like, we need that and the connection with the land and the
Yeah.
environment, and yeah.
Definitely. Yeah, part of the way it was framed was that there's tribal cultures around the world that rites of passage is a really important part of the coming of age. And
Mhm.
with the rites of passage comes a new name that describes what the person's coming into or what their gift is to the tribe or to the community. And we even learned about this one tribe. I forget exactly what the tribe was, but they have multiple rites of passages throughout the person's life. And each time they have a rites of passage, they take on a new name based on what their gift is to the community.
Hmm, that's amazing, yeah, and,
Mm,
I mean, we have our own versions of that.
mm,
I guess every culture, every civilization does, but one of the things I've thought a lot about, and I've talked about this on the podcast, is, imagine being in a tribe or a village
mm,
where there was a rites of passage like that, and everyone in that, or almost everyone in the tribe would witness you.
mm,
And then 10 years later, 20 years later, 30 years later, when you have your own children, when you get married, when you have these other big life moments, the majority of those people would witness you and
mm,
know that.
mm,
Versus in my outward bound program, and I'm imagining this is true for you, for yours, it's a beautiful rites of passage, but you may never see those people again, or you may
mm,
not see them very often.
mm,
And that quality of being witnessed in a group over time,
mm,
I think, is a part of connected with a lot of our sense of isolation,
mm,
alienation, mental health issues that people will go through.
mm,
Because it's just not how we have evolved to exist
mm,
in a world where you can move around so quickly, meet so many different people. There's good and
mm.
bad about it. I'm not saying it's
Yeah.
all bad, but I think that it's a big difference.
Mm.
Was that true on your program? Like, are you still in touch with some of the people?
Not to the extent that I was but for a while I was, because that was the nice thing about doing it in college was then when I went back, there were a bunch of people that were in that experience with me or in the program at other times of the year or different years that had gone through that. And that was also part of the idea behind the name was that when we got back to campus, we would call each other by those names
Oh, cool.
to remind each other of the
Yeah.
experience and bring each other back to it. And some people, I'm sure, stuck with their names, other people didn't. But there was definitely some friends I made in that program or people that had done the program at different times that I remained friends with for a while. And still, there's some people in the program that I'm in communication with. But also now that
Nice.
I've moved here to Boulder, a lot of my California friends I just see when I go to California.
Okay. Yeah, that
Mm,
makes sense.
yeah.
Yeah.
Mm,
Yeah. Well, cool. Well, so part of the reason why I invited you on the podcast and what we were
mm,
talking about before we hit record was your interest in things like, yeah, the environment and
mm,
connecting with some of these indigenous groups.
mm,
And then you just shared with me, maybe I can let you talk about it, but you're going to be some kind of performance at the psychedelic science conference this
mm.
summer. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
definitely. Well, It's been really exciting working on all this music and DJing a lot. And I feel like DJing has primarily been the way that I've been able to get myself out there as a musician, as a performer, start getting gigs. And recently I went on tour with Dirtwire for
Oh
the whole
yeah.
month of January, which was really amazing. And
So what? Tell us about this shovel guitar. I saw you
yeah,
posting about that.
yeah. So one of my friends, Max, got me a shovel guitar for my birthday years ago because he knows that I like permaculture, that I do a lot of permaculture design work, and that I'm a musician and I play guitar. So it was the perfect combination. But it was always kind of sitting in the corner of my studio. I would play it for fun, but never really played it with any shows. But then when I was asked to go on tour with Dirtwire, the shovel guitar just made perfect sense because they play all these crazy instruments and they have this like psychedelic cowboy kind of
Oh yeah.
vibe. So opening for
Fits
them
right
playing
in.
a shovel slide guitar was perfect.
It's like an actual shovel with a
Yeah,
guitar like pickup and
yeah,
strings
and it's three strings and it has a slide, so it's
uh,
really good for a rise in a song right before drop because then I can just go and then the song
oh
drops.
nice. Okay.
Yeah, and I can put different effects and things on it. So
That's cool.
yeah, so I've gotten to do all these fun gigs, which I might talk more about soon in this podcast. But coming up is, yeah, there's the Psychedelic Science Conference in mid-June, and it's going to be right
Yeah.
after the Sonic Bloom Festival.
It's
So
gonna
I'm going to,
be here in Denver.
yeah, I'll be
Yeah.
performing at Sonic Bloom, and then
Oh
right
nice.
afterwards is the Psychedelic Science Conference here in Denver, which in
Oh
the
cool.
past it was in Oakland. And their office, the MAPS office, and MAPS stands for Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies. So
Yeah.
I think it's cool that the acronym is MAPS. It's like the maps of consciousness.
Hmm.
And their main office was in Santa Cruz when I was going to school at UC Santa Cruz. So I
Oh
started
cool.
volunteering for them. And right at the time when I started volunteering for them was when they were getting ready for a big conference. They do their conference, I think, usually every other year, I'm pretty sure. It might even be
Huh.
one every 3 years, something like that. But
Yeah. So I was at the
mm,
one in Oakland,
mm,
2017.
mm,
I don't know how often they do them. I think the pandemic may
mm,
have
mm,
played its role, but that changed my life.
mm.
That's part of how I got into psychedelic therapy
Amazing.
and yeah.
Yeah, they're doing some really amazing breakthrough work, and they've really led the way in a lot of psychedelic therapy and psychedelic research, and also just making psychedelics something that the general public has accepted.
Yeah.
Because
It's
they did a lot of things that were pretty radical and revolutionary at the time, which now feels a lot more like the general public is accepting of it.
yeah, it's an interesting history. I think
Mm,
it's the cultural narrative has shifted.
mm,
And so things like MDMA for therapy is
mm,
becoming more and more mainstream and accepted, and MAPS played a
mm.
big role in that. But there was also just, I think, an underground cultural shift that happened that
Totally,
they were able to ride. But they
totally.
were there laying the groundwork, doing a lot of
Mm,
work in the like 90s, really, when people weren't paying much attention, when it
mm.
was pretty far out there.
Yeah,
So good for them. Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm in conversation with them about performing at
Cool.
the conference, and my housemate Amani Liquid Bloom from Desert Dwellers, he's also in conversation with them. And me and Amani tomorrow, by the time you are seeing this, it will already be released. But as of right now, tomorrow we're releasing a song with our friend Snow Raven, who's an indigenous Saka woman from Siberia, and she
Yeah.
makes these bird sounds, plays this Siberian jaw harp, she sings, and so she was
She's
in Boulder.
amazing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
she's really amazing
Incredible.
and really unique. And she was in Boulder. I think it was almost a year ago, or maybe could have been over a year ago, just a little bit.
Hmm.
And she came into the studio. We recorded her to a track that I had started, and then worked on the song. And then our friend Pipa from Futuro Nativo, um, she sent us some Shipibo vocals from when she was down in the jungle in the Amazon with
Nice.
the Shipibo tribe in Peru, and from this family in and Rao from one of the elders, Pedro. And so we wove in the Shipibo vocals, and then there was a Hunikuan elder, which is one of the tribes in the Amazon of Brazil. He happened to be in Boulder as well.
Wow.
And so we got him in the studio and recorded him. And so
And
there's
so say the name of his
three,
tribe again.
the Hunikuan.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's the one I'm not as
Yeah,
familiar with.
Hunikuan. A lot of people know of the Yawanawa. So there's the Yawanawa and the Hunikuan that are both in the Brazilian Amazon. And so we have, Shipibo vocals, Hunikuan vocals, and Saka vocals, and all fused into one song. So it's this fusion of shamanic cultures. And we have a beautiful music video coming out with the song and beautiful album art, and the song supporting both Snow Raven's organization, OLAX, which also supports the Saka people of Siberia, and we're supporting Futuro Nativo, which supports the Shipibo tribe.
Beautiful. I love that. That's such
Yeah.
a cool fusion. I love how you just had the fusion of shamanic cultures.
Uh-huh.
And I think you could include yourself in that, like the kind of work you're doing and what you're offering. And
Yeah,
it's
definitely.
like our own, like this culture's kind of return or rediscovery or recreation. Or,
Yeah.
with, I think electronic music plays a role in that, right?
Totally. Yeah, I mean, the word shamanic is all about being able to change consciousness, to be a healer, to bring medicine. And I actually used to, for a while, not want to even really use the word shamanic or shaman unless it was in the appropriate context. But I had a conversation with Snow Raven about this, and she's actually from the culture where the word shaman comes from.
Siberia, right?
Yeah, Siberia. So a lot of people call any medicine person from around the world a shaman, which the term itself actually comes from Siberia. But after talking with Snow Raven, she actually said anyone that is doing things in that energy of shamanic transformation, healing, connected with spirit, connected with the realms beyond what we can see. She said it's actually, according to her, appropriate to use the word shamanic as long as it's used in a good way.
Thanks for sharing that. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's an interesting history too. Like the word shaman, in my understanding, became commonly used in that way because of Mircea Eliade, who was this great scholar of religious studies, University of Chicago, like in the 50s and 60s. He wrote these huge books. And weirdly enough, that inspired me when I was a religious studies major. I didn't dive as into him because when I was in school, he was kind of being thrown under the bus. And like what you just said, like, oh, you shouldn't use this word shaman for all these different cultures. But what he was doing was looking at the commonalities, the universalities among human beings in their spirituality, and he found this element everywhere that he looked. And he used the word shaman for better or worse, but it's a useful word and it's stuck. So I think language evolves, and I love what you just shared, because sometimes from within these traditions they have a more universal understanding of language. I think that, and that's true, for example, of Buddhism. Like the word Buddha means someone who's awake, someone who's awakened.
Yeah.
So theoretically, you could use that for anyone who's achieved some level of awakening, of realization, whether or not you use the Buddhist language or the Buddhist tradition. Yeah, so refer to something, and that's actually talked about in that tradition. Like someone could be a bodhisattva without ever having heard the word bodhisattva. Someone who's doing compassionate things for others.
They're doing the same thing. They're here for the same mission or purpose. And I love the three jewels of Buddhism: the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, because that's, I feel like, such an important part of finding your path and your great work in the world, is finding your community, finding what your life's purpose is, your Dharma, and then finding your connection with yourself too.
Yeah, it's well said.
Yeah.
I heard someone say a couple of weeks ago, like, he was encouraging everyone to do their healing work, so to speak, to become healed. But he's like, once you are feeling good in yourself, then you want to find your Dharma. It's kind of like what you just said.
Yeah.
And that's the original, that's how the word Dharma was used originally. It didn't refer to a specific religion. It was like, your purpose, in a positive sense. Positive purpose in the world.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, especially cultural appropriation can be such a touchy subject, and I think it is important to be sensitive to and aware of, and to be in conversation about. But I think that's the key, is to be in conversation about it rather than avoid it because it's such a touchy subject. And what I've found is that there's some things that are, when you talk to the culture that the thing comes from, it's like completely off limits. It's like going to be way too offensive if you wear a feathered headdress. It's going to be way too offensive if you get a tattoo of a dream catcher. Sorry to those of you who have a tattoo of a dream catcher, but there's certain things where if you talk to the tribe where that symbol comes from, it's cultural appropriation and not something that you're wanting to do, because it's just continuing the oppressive nature of the colonial past. But then there's certain things where the culture wants it to be shared because it's their medicine for the world, and the more it's shared, the more it's bringing their message and their healing and their medicine to the world. So I think it's more about being in conversation about it and understanding from the people that these symbols and teachings come from.
Yeah, I love that. Thanks for saying that. And it's something I always want to be learning more about. I'm not an expert on all of, I don't know if anyone could be. There's so many different tribes and groups. But I mean, part of what comes up for me hearing you say that in our culture at large is like, it's okay to make mistakes. Like, we're human, we make mistakes. I make mistakes, you make mistakes, we all make mistakes. And so part of the problem with our culture recently seems to be this, like, we've lost sight of that. Like, someone can sometimes make a mistake, they can learn from it and change, versus like, they're some terrible person or they have some negative intentions. And when we talk
Totally.
about things like racism or cultural appropriation in the negative sense, it's implying intention. And if that intention isn't in that person's mind, then they're not really racist in any meaningful sense. Maybe they've done something that was offensive and maybe they could understand that and not do it again. It's very different than intentionally believing that some people are superior to others based on skin tone or whatever it is. Like,
it's true, yeah. And it is good to know that there's a difference between intention and impact. So you could have the best of intentions but have a harmful impact. But then I heard from this other podcast actually the perspective that a lot of people are in their spiritual infancy, and you don't like want to shame and scold and like kick out an infant that like doesn't know what they're doing. You want to invite them in and talk to them and teach them some things. And it's about it's about compassion, really.
Yeah, I heard someone talk about calling people in instead of calling them out.
Yeah,
and
I think that's important. Yeah, because really what we're here to do, what we're doing here is create community and create harmony on the planet. And so that goes back to a lot of the intention in my music is I've been teaching this workshop called Music as a Catalyst for Regenerative Action. So I do music and I do event organizations. I also organize these retreats where people come and learn how to make music and how to DJ and write songs and learn about music business and things like that. But for a long time, I've also been really in the permaculture world, going to permaculture conferences and helping to organize permaculture design courses. And there's this amazing teacher, Starhawk. She's also an author. Yeah, she wrote The Fifth Sacred Thing. Yeah, The City of Refuge, a lot of books. And I took her permaculture design course in Canada and then returned the following year to be a teacher's assistant. And
I didn't know that.
During the course, at the end of every permaculture design course, everyone gets into groups and comes up with a design project. And usually it's like design a water system for the land or a rooftop garden or a market garden or for a farmer's market or something like that. But the project that the people I was there with and I proposed was to do a permaculture music tour, and Starhawk liked the idea. So the whole time that everyone was doing these design projects, we were actually planning this whole permaculture music tour. And then the following summer, we did the tour and we went down the West Coast and we called it Blooming Biodiversity. And we went to probably about 60 locations because everywhere we went, people kept saying like, oh, you guys should come to our farm. You should come to our farm.
That's so
Partially
cool.
because it was like, we got 20 people and we'll come to your farm and do a bunch of work for free and play music. And everyone's like, yeah, come to my land.
So part of the tour was you were doing some work on land?
Yeah, so we were doing work on land everywhere we went, and then we would do concerts either before, after, or during to bring people in. And we basically took everything we loved about festival culture, workshops, yoga, and music, and then we would combine that with hands-on action to support the land. And we did it in the fall, so it was harvest time. So everywhere we went, they had tons of food to share with us. So we got fed the whole time. We had places to stay the whole time. We helped out on the land a bunch, dug a lot of swales and holes and compost systems and things like that. Cool. And had an amazing time.
That's so cool. So, I guess was this always an interest of yours, like permaculture? How did that develop?
That's a good question. Well, in college, I happened to be going to UC Santa Cruz during the Occupy movement, which was in 2011.
Yeah.
And so there was Occupy Wall Street happening, but at the same time, there was also the Occupy Education movement happening, where people were shutting down their campuses all the time. We actually went to Sacramento to the Capitol building and shut down the Capitol building, and we all got arrested and bailed out and all of that. And we actually all got off the hook really easily because whoever wrote up the ticket for us, they put the wrong code in, and so we all got charged for skiing in an area you're not supposed to ski in. And so it was really easy for the lawyers to just be like, oh, no one was skiing here. They're off the hook. But yeah, anyways, we had a day where we shut down the administration building on our campus at UC Santa Cruz. And we shut it down for 2 or 3 days. We set up a projector screen and we Zoom called people in Berlin that were doing the same thing as us, people in Iceland. Like we were having Zoom calls with, like, this was a global movement. I think at the time there was over 100 campuses around the world that were shutting down the campus and protesting in solidarity. So it became really big for a moment. And then after shutting down the administration building for a couple days, all of the police forces from all up and down California were called to come get us out of there. And there were people all the way from Santa Barbara, all the way from Northern California. It was like this whole force, and they all had riot gear, and they were standing outside the building. And then the chief of police came up, and we had barricaded the door. And he just kind of wiggled the door, and our barricade fell apart. And he just opened the door, and we're like, oh, that was anticlimactic. And then he said, all right, everyone, we can come in and arrest you all, or you can all leave and we won't arrest you. And we were like, well, we've shut down this administration building for a few days. I'd call that a success.
You're done.
And we're like, let us have a quick meeting. And we had a quick meeting, and we're like, let's just call it a victory. And we all marched out and we're like, yeah, victory. And the police forces that had traveled from all across California just watched us march out and cheer. But as we were leaving the building, this one guy turned to me and he said, yeah, this protest stuff is cool and all, but I really want to get into permaculture. That's the real revolution. And I'm like, permaculture, what's that? And so it was in my awareness. And then I started.
That's where you heard about it.
Yeah, I took some environmental classes in my senior year, and I even got to be a student teacher for a class. And then when I started traveling after graduating in 2012, I landed on a permaculture farm in Nicaragua for a month.
Oh, amazing.
And that's where I first learned about permaculture.
Okay, thanks for sharing that. That's incredible. So there were classes on permaculture at your university?
There were, but the program I was in was called Education for Sustainable Living, which was this whole student-run program. Like everything about it was the people organizing it, the people teaching and facilitating, everything was students, other than once a week on Mondays, they would get some like big innovator in sustainability to come and give a big lecture. And so you could sign up to either be a student or a teacher. And if you were a teacher, you didn't actually have to know anything about what you were teaching. You just had to come up with a curriculum, and then you could all learn about the thing together. So it was actually more of a facilitator than a teacher. So I actually signed up to facilitate rather than to just be a student. And I put together a class about all the things I wanted to learn about sustainability. It was called A Sustainable World, Where We Are, What's Happening, and Where We're Going. Where we've been, where we are, and where we're going. And I even put on a little like mini TED Talk style conference where I got some of my professors and some of my friends and even like my meditation teachers. And I just got everyone to give this conference as my like final presentation.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Okay. That's an interesting approach to education. I could see someone being cynical about that. Like, why are you paying all this money for if the teacher doesn't know what they're teaching, but you can learn it together.
Totally.
But so, I mean, permaculture has grown a lot. I mean, this is a subject hasn't really been addressed on this podcast. If you wanted to give us like a brief like download around permaculture, that would be really cool. So.
Yeah, so permaculture is a term coined by Bill Mollison and his student, David Holmgren. Bill Mollison was from Tasmania, and his student, David Holmgren, was from Melbourne, Australia, which is the closest part of Australia to the island of Tasmania. And the two of them basically spent a lot of time traveling the world, studying places around the world, studying indigenous cultures, studying natural ecosystems. They spent a lot of time with this Japanese guy, Masanobu Fukuoka, who wrote this book, The One Straw Revolution.
Great name.
And yeah, they basically studied as much as they could about regenerative agriculture, and then they put it all into one model called permaculture, which means permanent culture, and it also means permanent agriculture. So it's designing permanent systems based on how a rainforest naturally creates its symbiosis, or how indigenous cultures from around the world found ways to harvest water and grow food. And It's basically a synthesis of just as many things as they could learn about that worked well, put into one system. So that's something that I think is really beautiful about it, and it's based on three ethics, which are care for the earth, care for the people, and the third one has been called different things: fair share, return the surplus, and care for the future. Some people just call it that. But essentially, if it's permaculture, it has to be following those ethics. So you can't do
Okay.
permaculture if you're not caring for the earth and if you're not
I
caring
love
for the
that.
people.
What's the ethical
Yeah.
component is
Mhm.
integral to that
Yeah, definitely.
approach. Great. That
Mhm.
makes sense.
Mhm.
Yeah, I've heard it explained in contrast to just sustainability. It's like
Mm.
something deeper and more generative and
Yeah.
blooming. More
Totally. Yeah, and the word sustainability has actually kind of gotten a lot of criticism now because you can sustain anything. You can sustain a destructive corporation,
Mm.
and it's a sustainable business because they're maintaining their ability to continue making money through extractive practices. So sustainable is not necessarily, although I will argue that it's all about context. They say content is king, but context is queen. So the word sustainable is appropriate in certain contexts and is a good thing in certain contexts, but the word that people have been using in that kind of world more than sustainable is regenerative, because we're not just wanting to sustain things the way that they are, but we're wanting to create conditions for things to regenerate and
I like that.
sprout back up every season.
It makes me think of like in therapy and healing, like resiliency,
Mhm.
and regenerative has a similar
Totally.
connotation for me. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, good. I mean, I've heard people talk about permaculture that in theory it could produce more food, be more generative, all the things we're talking about.
Mhm.
Like it seems doable to a lot of people. Do you
Yeah.
have any thoughts on that? Like could we transition to that for the number of people that we have
Yeah.
on this earth?
We definitely could. The thing is that permaculture, it all depends, because I mean a lot of permaculture is about growing things together in symbiotic harmony as opposed to monocrop, which requires usually pesticides, which is why things then become less organic. And then the main issue beyond the pesticides use is also that it degenerates rather than regenerates the soil, and we're losing
Right.
more and more topsoil every year. So even if everyone wasn't doing a full-on permaculture garden everywhere, as I think even just some permaculture principles like growing food in guilds, which means growing things that like to grow together, like the most essential example is beans, corn, and squash. That's called the Three Sisters. They grow together super well. If there's just some thoughts about like compost and growing things that like to grow together with each other, and efficient use of water and energy and things like that, I think even just applying permaculture principles would drastically support and help the agricultural systems. And it could be moving in the direction to full on like permaculture food forests and farms and gardens.
Yeah. That's such a beautiful phrase, food forest.
Yeah.
We don't have to go too far down this rabbit hole, but anything to share with us around being vegetarian versus eating meat as part of
Yeah,
just in
I
terms of the
mean, that is a
sustainability?
controversial thing, especially in the permaculture world, because a lot of permaculture farms and farms in general do have animals that they raise, and a lot of times that actually really supports the soil and supports the income that the farmers able to make, and sometimes that's how they fund their whole operation. And so it's different. Some farmers, their main focus is the vegetables, or if you're in a tropical place, or even a like subtropical place, sometimes it's fruit production is a lot, and sometimes it's the products you make out of it. Sometimes it's the herbal medicine. But there's also a lot of farmers that raise animals, and there's something called holistic land management, which means that you're raising animals and you have them on certain parts of the land for a certain amount of time, and then it's called rotational grazing, where you then move the fence where the animal is and move the animals to another part of the land and then another part of the land. And what they're doing the whole time, they're eating and they're pooping, and it's fertilizing the soil. And like I said earlier, we're drastically and quickly losing our topsoil, which creates the fertility to grow food. The animals quickly regenerate that topsoil, and it's actually a way that land can quickly if done in the right way, can quickly be regenerated, and you can create a lot of fertile soil to grow more food in. So I think it really just depends. I mean, like, basically what it comes down to is factory farming is extremely horrible for the environment. Holistic land management is arguably actually really healthy for the environment.
Yeah, that makes sense to me.
Mm.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it's also, I think in terms of like large scale things versus a personal choice to look at like what people are going to choose and want. I mean, you know, 'cause I've seen some backlash against environmentalism from where there's a sense of like I don't want to be told what to do. You know, I want to be a free person and make my own choice, and so I'm going to drive my truck and whatever, blah blah blah. Like,
Yeah.
so for the environmental movement to not come from that place of moralistically telling people what to do, I think it's going to be a better approach. That makes sense. Like that invitation again, to use that word, inviting people in rather than telling them this is good, this is bad, kind of in a simplistic way.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and there's arguments for everything. I mean, I've seen Kip Anderson's films, and the Seaspiracy one. Like, a lot of people say like, oh, I'll just eat fish because that's not as bad for the environment. And then Kip Anderson makes this film showing you like, oh, never mind. So it just depends on how you look at it. And
it's overwhelming. I think I actually often advise people to like look at the news less, like be aware of your information diet that you're taking in. Because that's the other downside of our age of information and all this stuff is like with these huge things. It's important to be informed, but it can be overwhelming to these huge scale problems, and that overwhelm or despair or the worst case scenario, a sense of like nihilism, like, okay, nothing matters because it's all going to hell anyway. Those are not helpful. So don't, if you're taking a lot of information that's leading to that outcome, that's not helping you. It's not helping other people. Yeah,
definitely. Well, something really struck a chord with me in this book that I read some years ago that said essentially the world is getting worse every day, but it's also getting better every day.
Nice.
And the choices that we make in the world hopefully help the world to get better faster than it gets worse.
Yeah. We need some hope, some optimism. There's been some really fascinating psychological studies on optimism, where people who are more pessimistic are actually seeing things more clearly and objectively true, but the people with more optimism are more able to get things done and have more energy. And so in a sense, it's like a evolutionary adaptation advantage to be optimistic, whether or not it's warranted by the situation. So anyway, I love how you are. I think most people probably know you through your music, but there's all these other interests that are like so intimately connected with it. It's like this bigger sense of purpose. To go back to that,
definitely.
And you seem like someone who's like doing a lot. You're getting a lot done. Posting and music and all these things. What's your secret? How are you doing so much?
Well, it's definitely a balance. I do my best to try to find the balance between having time to take care of my health, whether that's working out, doing yoga, meditating, going out into nature, staying connected with my relationships, with my girlfriend, with my parents and my brother, and my housemate and my friends who come through town, and like keeping that active, but also making sure that I have a clear idea of what I'm creating. And it definitely gets overwhelming sometimes because I'm not just making music, I'm also organizing retreats, I'm doing my own graphics, I'm booking my own shows, and I'm working on delegating more and creating more of a team, but I'm still at the phase of doing a lot of the work on my own. And so I've definitely find myself in phases where I'm just like, all right, I need to dedicate the majority of my day to just being on my computer and getting as much of this done as possible. Right now, the imminence of the spring coming is an extra motivational factor because I'm like, I just want to be outside in fields of flowers, enjoying the sunshine in the springtime. So I'm trying to just get as much work done as I can before then, so I don't feel stuck in the office or in the studio. But I can have a lot more time to just be outside and explore and be in nature, which is also an important thing to feed the creative process, is being in nature. But it's also about the phases, because when I'm traveling and I'm on tour, I don't have as much time in the studio. Right. And so that makes it this time that I'm home right now in Boulder and have a lot of time in the studio, it makes it feel even more important for me to focus my time because it's like these
Yeah,
little windows I get to really create and finish projects, finish music.
totally. That makes
Mhm.
sense. Yeah. Is mindfulness or meditation part of your daily routine? Or how does that play
I
in?
wouldn't say daily, but it's definitely an important part
Mm.
of my practice. There was definitely a point in my life, especially when I was in college and taking a lot of classes in meditation and part of
Mm.
meditation groups. There was times where meditation was a daily practice, and I think for a while after I graduated college, as I was traveling, I would meditate and do yoga every day for a long time. And I'd say as of recently, it's more there's days where I'll wake up, work out, do yoga, meditate. There's days where I'll just like go straight to making coffee and breakfast and get to work. And then there's days where I'll
Mm.
just like I really need to take my time and it like takes me an hour to get out of bed and I just like have to really go at a slow pace. So
Mm.
I've learned to not feel ashamed of myself for those times because I've realized that sometimes I just need to be really slow because I've
Yeah.
been doing so much.
Good. That's a good thing
Mhm.
to share too.
Yeah.
Yeah, to be able to honor the downtime and the
Yeah.
rejuvenation and that's important.
Mhm. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. But I will say I feel great when I am able to meditate and um, take care of my body. And then the rest of the day, I feel very clear.
Yeah. Yeah, it can make a big difference.
Mm,
I think it can be helpful, like you're saying, to take off the burden of feeling like you have to do it every day.
mm,
You don't have to, but it can be
totally.
helpful.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, because it comes to the point where like feeling bad about yourself for not
Yeah,
doing your practice might be more detrimental than actually not doing the practice.
it's possible.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and remember the purpose, like why you're doing it, that
Yeah.
it's not to feel bad about it.
Mm,
Um, yeah, interesting. So let me think here. I guess a question I had for you that I was thinking about earlier today is if, you're kind of imagine like your ideal future self,
mm,
like where all this is going for you, what's your vision for it? Like, do you see yourself headlining festivals?
mm.
Is that the goal? Or creating a lot of original music?
Yeah.
Or, yeah.
Yeah, well, definitely creating a lot of original music, and I do have a pretty significant amount of original music that is in the process of being released. That's the exciting thing about being home and at the studio so much right now is I'm working on a lot of different songs at different stages. Some sending to be uploaded and published, some sending to be mastered, some I'm working on the final mix, or some I'm just starting. And so there's different phases, but I have a lot of songs in progress and process. So I feel like that's a really important part of it for me is releasing and performing more original music. Like for example, at Envision Festival in February,
Yeah.
I did this really fun set at the Yoga Zone, the Templo de las Estrellas. That it was the second day of the festival. The main stages weren't open, and there was a ton of people there. And I got to play 11 original tracks, which was the most amount of original music I've played in a single set. And that
That's
felt
great.
really good. And
Cool.
so that's kind of the thing is DJing has created a path for me, and then I get to fill it in with more and more original music as I complete it. So that's a big part of it. And also, yeah, just playing more gigs. I always think about Red Rocks as kind of a like major
Mm.
goal. Like
Yeah.
one day headlining Red Rocks, that's kind of like the center of the vision board, so to speak. And I feel like that's a good motivational factor. I feel like when you dream really big, it helps you to do bigger things and make decisions that steer you in that direction. And so,
Hmm.
yeah, headlining Red Rocks one day um, and headlining a festival. Um, I just got a potential offer to headline a festival for the first time. It's a smaller festival, but if it happens, that will be
Cool.
amazing and it will feel
Yeah.
really good. And just doing bigger things with the music and being able to use the music as a platform for like permaculture action and supporting indigenous cultures and community-based land projects and things like that.
Yeah, that's great. It's so exciting. It makes sense for you and your audience, I would
Mm,
imagine, like that, all those connections, like it makes sense.
mm,
I like how you described your musical journey of like DJing as like gotten you more known. You're
mm,
mostly playing other people's music,
mm,
but weaving in more and more of your original music
mm.
as a way. That's a cool like pathway to
Yeah.
because you're already creating a name for yourself,
Mm.
So
Definitely. Yeah, I feel like it's been a really important part of the journey because it actually takes a long time to get to the point with music production where I've felt confident in what I'm doing to the extent of my songs being able to match the songs that I like to play
Mm,
out live.
yeah.
And so if I had just waited to only perform original music, then maybe it wouldn't have been to the quality I had wanted because I wouldn't have had enough education at that point, or maybe I would have just continuously been in the state of I'm not ready yet. But with
Mm,
DJing, I could just throw myself out there, find music I
yeah.
love, play it, create experiences. And then what I found is actually the more I find and listen to and play and dance to music that I really love, the more that influences the music that I make because I
Right.
hear like my favorite parts of different songs. I get more used to the dynamics and the structure of songs that I really love. And then that
Yeah.
influences the music that I create.
Totally. It's almost like when you were saying that, I was just imagining you. It's almost like you're training under these teachers, and those
Yeah.
teachers are these other songs or
Yeah,
artists.
totally.
But like I've been getting into DJing some, and like it has definitely changed the way that I will listen and
Mm,
experience music. Kind of
mm,
like just different things you're thinking about and looking at, understanding and song structure and all this.
mm,
And then the other piece is like if you're DJing, if I'm DJing and I want people to dance, like that's the
mm,
space I'm trying to create. So that's just like such a direct feedback loop, like right
mm.
in front of you,
Yeah,
you know?
yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's important too to enjoy dancing to music also because you can
Mm,
really tell when someone's performing or DJing and there's someone that also loves to be in the audience dancing versus someone who doesn't. I mean, it's all its own thing. Some people are just like super geniuses at creating amazing music, but they don't really dance, and that's totally fine. But especially for an ecstatic dance DJ, the more you love to dance, the more you're going to be stoked to create
mm.
a musical journey that's really amazing for people to dance to.
Yeah, it's like experiencing music through your body, expressing it through your
Yeah.
body. Well, yeah,
Mm.
yeah, it makes sense. Well, so here's a question for you. You can take it however you want, but obviously, music has become central to you. It's a huge part of your life, what you're
Mm.
offering the world, how people know about you. And music has such a special place in the heart for so
Mm.
many people. And there's not really anything else like it exactly. Like, what do you think it is about music
Mm.
that gives it that quality?
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it can get really esoteric. They say like the universe started with sound, like all these different religions talk about sound being the first thing that existed. Like, first the word was God, and like there's the
Hmm.
music of the spheres, which is a Sufi concept. And there's all this thing about sound and vibration being kind of the creative force of the universe. So it's something that's inherent to our being. And also, sound is all vibration and it's all just different wavelengths that are um, happening at different frequencies. And even right now, our voices are going into Ableton as we're talking and recording this
Yeah.
podcast. And it's all just this wavelength that we're seeing on the screen. And yeah, I feel like music is just so, it's something that really can get into our body and really into our heart and really into our soul because it's beyond the body.
Mm,
It's the
yeah.
vibrations of creation.
Nice. I like it.
Mm, yeah.
Yeah, it kind of it goes literally goes through matter, goes through our body.
Hmm.
That's a good way to look at it.
Yeah.
There's something. It's kind of like to me, at least part of it is it's kind of bridging matter and spirit, so to speak,
Mm,
or
mm,
matter and consciousness, or however you want to think about
mm,
it. It's like,
yeah.
like the energy,
Mm,
because like sound, is like connected with the breath,
mm,
with breathing, with vocalizing.
mm,
Um, yeah, it'd be interesting if like some animals like whales or dolphins, they
mm,
have like their own kind of music
yeah.
because they've evolved different ways of
Hmm.
hearing, experiencing sound.
Hmm.
So
Yeah, whale songs and yeah, dolphin sounds are super fascinating. I mean, they it's yeah, there's been some research on it and someone found that there's actually this cove somewhere, I think in Asia, where there's these ancient elder whales that are the song teachers and they teach these songs and it's like every year there's a new song that comes out of these whales and they teach it to other whales who then go and spread it to other
oh,
whales and then the whole ocean it's like the whales are singing it's almost like a radio station it's like the top whale songs and it like spreads throughout and they find it like all around the world the same song and then the next year it's a new song and it's almost like there's this whole like thing going on underneath the surface of the ocean that is way more advanced than
mm,
what we can even comprehend.
that's so cool to hear
Mm,
about. Yeah. I've heard some sad news about that, which is that some of the like Navy submarine
Mm,
sonar radar stuff can interfere with, all their
mm,
shipping and stuff can interfere with some of that, but
mm,
it's so beautiful. Yeah.
yeah.
Hopefully we keep learning more about that kind of thing and it like inspires us to help
Mm,
protect that, not interfere with
totally.
it, to honor it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's definitely people doing that work as much as possible. Like I have a good friend here in Boulder, Sean Heinrichs,
Oh yeah.
who he does underwater photography and videography, all geared towards ocean conservation. And he and his team went to the United Nations Conference of the Parties in this last year. It was in Egypt. And they actually were able to pass an international bill that protects all these different endangered species of sharks,
Mm.
including the most commonly hunted sharks. And so it's like there's people inspired by animals in the ocean that love going underwater and taking pictures and videos of them
Yeah.
that are actually going and helping to pass these laws that make it illegal to hunt, search,
Mm.
and see creatures that used to be there used to not be a law protecting them.
Yeah. That's
Mm,
good. I really wish, like, it just seems, I mean, to some degree, this is happening, but I really wish on our earth, on our world, that we get, all these different nations could have their squabbles and differences and even
mm,
war with each other. But that environmental piece and like the oceans in particular could be like we could all agree to like help protect that.
mm,
And I think we're moving that direction kind of, but it does seem that like the political, when you see something like the Russia-Ukraine war,
mm.
it's like they're not obviously caring about the environment. They're dropping bombs on,
Totally.
on people.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like
It's
it's
these
maybe
power
you can't
struggles.
really separate those two too
Mm.
much, right? They have to go together.
Yeah.
Um,
Definitely, and I'm sure there's deeper layers to everything and agendas and historical context and everything, but a lot of it comes down to resource and power struggle.
yeah, a sense of fear, right, and
Mm,
scarcity. Because if you have the trust and a sense of abundance and that you have enough, then you don't
mm,
need to do something like that, right?
mm,
At least in part.
mm,
I don't want to overly simplify it either, but
mm,
but that yeah, that like fear that we may, like for example, fear that the earth is being consumed or being degraded, and you have to like try to get as much as you can now before it's too
mm,
late. Those kinds of attitudes, I think, underlie a lot of the destruction happening
mm,
versus an attitude of trust and abundance and
mm,
I have enough, you'll have enough. Like
mm.
that's a different kind of mindset
Yeah.
underlying a lot of that. Yeah.
Mm.
So yeah, well, it's been great having you on the podcast.
Yeah.
Do you want to share? I know you spoke a little bit, but like all your projects, what you have going
Mm.
on, anything you want to share with us? Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I am organizing some music retreats coming up. The next one is right before the High Vibe Music Festival, which is a festival organized by Equanimous and has an amazing lineup of artists, including Ayla Nerio, Ruby Chase, just all these incredible artists coming. And the Light Code project by Ellis Dream, the sound healing project, will be there as well. And I'll be DJing at the festival. That's going to be in California, May 4th through 8th. And so the retreat that we're doing is the 4 days leading up to it, May 1st through 4th, at
Oh,
the
cool.
same location. And we're going to have classes from me, from Equanimous, Ruby Chase, Mikey Parker, Clarity, Nyrus, Great Medicine Show, Johnny June, Moondrop, and we're all going to be teaching music production, DJing, and music business. And there's going to also be a lot of time for hands-on learning, mentorship, co-creation. So if you're watching this and you want to come learn music production, come check out the High Vibe Music Retreat, and then you'll get to stay for the High Vibe Music Festival. That's in Northern California, beginning of May. And then we're also in conversation about doing the same thing near Durango, Colorado, connected to the Unison Festival in September.
Oh,
So
cool.
last year we did Unis Sound, which was a music production retreat connected to Unison. So we're talking about doing the same thing. And then beyond that, I teach online classes. I teach in-person classes. I've done some with Julian
Yeah.
here.
Yeah,
And
maybe I'll share about that in intro.
yeah,
But you taught me
right?
how to DJ some, so I appreciate that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah, I think I'm going to be at Unison this year too. I taught a workshop there the year before last, so
Mhm.
hopefully I'll be able to make it back this year. And
Mhm.
you mentioned Sonic Bloom
Yeah.
would be there.
Yeah, I'll be
Yeah,
at Sonic Bloom Festival,
cool.
and that's going to be the weekend before the MAPS Psychedelic Science Conference as well. So,
Awesome. And then I've talked a little bit about this on the podcast, but I started a community house here in Boulder called the Awareness House,
Mhm.
and you're going to be performing there next
Yeah.
Friday from when we're recording this. So
yeah, so I'm
April 7th.
excited. And if you're
Yeah.
watching this before Friday, then come to the Awareness House because we're going to have a really fun and beautiful event with music and all sorts of secret surprises that you'll find out about once you get there. And and beyond that, I also have a bunch of other gigs coming up in the Colorado area, including one called Rhythmatic Ritual at Valley Soul Sanctuary, a pagan party with me and Liepman Bloom, and a bunch of other artists, and just a bunch of fun shows. And I've been organizing with two others in the community, Ali and Danny, a weekly ecstatic dance called the Boulder Ecstatic Dance. So that's every Sunday night. So if you're ever in Boulder on a Sunday night and want to come dance, we have a really beautiful community we're cultivating. There's a pretty consistent number of people that come every week, and it's slowly growing, and we just have really good music that comes every time.
Yeah, that's been a really awesome thing to have here in the area. And one of the artists you just mentioned, Equanimous, was there a couple weeks ago, right?
Yeah.
So that was great.
Yeah, that was fun.
Doing so much.
Yeah.
Love it.
Yeah, it's been a lot. I mean, it's a lot to be organizing and performing, but it all kind of weaves into each other, and it's all fun. And it's like we talked about the Dharma. It all feels like it's part of the Dharma that I'm on. Yeah,
because part of what everything you just mentioned has in common is bringing people together, right? In music and movement and connections. So,
yeah.
Absolutely. Well, great. Thanks for being on the podcast.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, Julian.
Thank you so much for listening to another episode of A State of Mind podcast. I work here in Boulder, Colorado as a psychotherapist, coach, and meditation teacher, and you can learn more about that at astateofmindcounseling.org. You can learn more about the podcast at our website, astateofmindpodcast.com, and you can also get a t-shirt, stickers, a hoodie like this one I'm wearing, and other goodies. Send us a message if you want those. Feel free to send us any feedback. If you'd like to support this podcast directly, you can do that at patreon.com/astateofmind. And another way that you can support the show is just to share it with friends, share it with family, post about it on your social media accounts, leave us a positive review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. All those things make a big difference, and they're greatly appreciated. And I really appreciate everyone who listens to this, who sends us a message, who shows their support. We are at over 100 episodes now, and it's just been an incredible journey with this podcast. And I'm really looking forward to bringing you more great episodes, great conversations, and great content in the future. So stay tuned, and I will see you here next time.